The old man kept staring at the mountain road long after the couple had disappeared into the snow. Then he quietly whispered to himself, "They won't make it past Blackthorn Pass before sunset." 3 hours later, the girl was found unconscious in the snow with human bite marks on her leg. Everyone dreams about riding through endless mountains, the cold wind, the untouched snow, the feeling that there is nothing in the world except you and the road ahead. But there are places where the mountains don't want visitors. Places where locals stop talking the moment certain names are mentioned. Places where people disappear without explanation. This story happened in 2018. It involves a young couple named Ryan Mercer and Claire Dawson. What happened to them in the frozen mountains still terrifies everyone who knows the story. Ryan owned a small electronics business in the city of Ashford. For years he had dreamed of taking a long motorcycle trip across the northern mountain ranges. His girlfriend Claire loved adventure just as much as he did. For months they researched routes online. They watched travel videos, read blogs, spoke with experienced riders. Eventually they created a rough plan. No deadlines, no strict schedule, no pressure, just 2 motorcycles, a few bags of luggage, and thousands of miles of open road. When the day finally arrived, Ryan handed responsibility for his business to his younger brother. "If I'm gone longer than expected, handle everything," he said. His brother laughed. "Just don't freeze to death up there." At the time, nobody realized how close those words would come to becoming reality. For nearly a week everything went perfectly. The roads were beautiful. The weather was clear. Every day felt like an adventure. After several days of riding, they reached a mountain town called Stonehaven. This would be their final stop before entering one of the most remote regions in the country. The next morning they planned to cross Blackthorn Pass, a dangerous mountain route sitting more than 16,000 feet above sea level. Most travelers crossed it during daylight and reached the next settlement before nightfall. That was Ryan and Claire's plan as well, or at least it had been, because the mountains had other plans. The following morning they left Stonehaven shortly after sunrise. The road climbed steadily upward. Massive snow-covered peaks surrounded them from every direction. The higher they went, the thinner the air became. At first Claire was excited. She kept taking photographs whenever they stopped. "This place doesn't even look real," she said. Ryan laughed. "Wait until we reach the summit." The first half of the journey went smoothly. Then, around mid-afternoon, disaster struck. Ryan suddenly felt the rear of his motorcycle wobble. He slowed down immediately. The tire was flat, a puncture. The nearest settlement was miles away. Luckily, Ryan carried repair equipment. The problem was that fixing it took nearly an hour. By the time he finished, the sun was already beginning its slow descent. They were behind schedule. Far behind. "We should still make it," Ryan said confidently. Claire wasn't so sure. The mountains around them seemed different now. The shadows were growing longer. The air felt colder. And strangely enough, there were fewer travelers on the road. Almost none. As they continued climbing higher, Claire began rubbing her forehead. "You okay?" Ryan asked. "My head hurts. Altitude sickness maybe. It feels strange." Ryan wasn't too concerned. Many travelers experienced headaches at high elevations. They decided to continue. Another 30 minutes passed. Claire's condition became worse. The headache had turned into dizziness. At one point she nearly lost her balance while climbing off her motorcycle. That's when they arrived at a lonely roadside stop known as Frostwind Station. There wasn't much there. A few wooden structures, several parked trucks, and a small restaurant built from weathered stone. Smoke drifted from its chimney. Inside, an elderly man sat beside a stove drinking tea. The moment Ryan and Claire entered, every conversation in the room seemed to stop. The locals glanced at them briefly, then looked away. Ryan walked to the counter. "Do you have medicine for headaches?" The old man studied Claire carefully. "How long have you been climbing?" "Since this morning." The old man nodded. "First time at this altitude?" "Yes." The man's expression darkened. "That's not good." Ryan explained their travel plans. The old man listened quietly. When Ryan mentioned Blackthorn Pass, the old man's eyes narrowed. "You plan to cross the pass today?" "Yes." The old man immediately shook his head. "No." Ryan laughed. "We'll be fine." The old man didn't smile. "You won't." A strange silence filled the room. Even the locals seemed uncomfortable. Ryan glanced around. Nobody was speaking. Nobody was eating. Everyone was listening. The old man leaned forward. "Stay here tonight. We already lost time because of a puncture. Stay here. We need to reach the next settlement." The old man's voice became firm. "No. You need to stay here." Claire looked at Ryan. For the first time, she seemed nervous. "Maybe we should listen." Ryan shook his head. "We're only a few hours away." The old man sighed heavily. Then he looked through the window toward the distant mountains. "You see those peaks?" Ryan nodded. There are things in those mountains that don't belong among the living. Ryan smiled awkwardly. You're trying to scare us. No. The old man spoke so quietly that Ryan almost didn't hear him. I'm trying to warn you. A cold chill ran through Claire's body. Outside, the wind suddenly howled against the building. The old man continued staring toward the mountains, as if remembering something he wished he could forget. After a long silence, Ryan asked, "What exactly are you warning us about?" The old man's eyes slowly returned to him. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he spoke. Many years ago, traders crossed these mountains using routes older than any road you see today. They carried supplies through snowstorms. They traveled alone. And sometimes, the old man's voice lowered. They never reached the other side. Ryan crossed his arms. Because of the weather, the old man slowly shook his head. That's what people believed. The room fell silent again. Even the crackling fire seemed quieter. The old man looked directly at Claire. If darkness catches you near Blackthorn Pass, he paused. If you hear someone calling your name from the snow, his expression became pale. Do not answer. A sudden gust of wind slammed against the restaurant windows. Claire nearly jumped. The old man continued, no matter what voice you hear, no matter who it sounds like, keep riding. Never leave the road. The warning sounded so serious that even Ryan felt uncomfortable, but he quickly convinced himself the old man was exaggerating. Perhaps he simply wanted them to stay and pay for a room. That explanation made far more sense. At least that's what Ryan believed. A decision he would regret before the sun went down. 30 minutes later, despite every warning, Ryan and Claire climbed back onto their motorcycles. The old man followed them outside. Snowflakes drifted through the air. Dark clouds gathered above the distant mountains. One final time he called out to them. Turn back if the sun starts setting. Ryan waved casually. We'll be fine. The old man watched silently as their motorcycles disappeared into the winding mountain road. Then he whispered something under his breath. Something neither Ryan nor Claire could hear. A prayer. Because deep down, the old man already knew where they were heading. And he knew what waited there after dark. The further Ryan and Claire rode into the mountains, the more isolated the world became. The road twisted through endless walls of snow. The sky had darkened into a dull gray. Strong winds pushed across the peaks, carrying loose snow through the air like drifting ghosts. For nearly an hour, neither of them spoke. Ryan was focused on the road. Claire was focused on the pounding pain inside her head. Every mile seemed colder than the last. Every turn seemed to lead deeper into nowhere. Eventually Claire grabbed Ryan's shoulder. Stop for a second. Ryan slowed his motorcycle. What happened? I don't feel right. You still dizzy? Claire nodded. My head feels heavy. We're almost there. No, Ryan. I mean really heavy. Ryan looked around. There was nothing but mountains. Nothing but snow. Nothing but silence. If they stopped here for the night, they would be completely exposed. We'll reach the summit first. Claire reluctantly agreed. The road climbed higher, and higher, and higher, until finally they reached the highest point of Blackthorn Pass. The place looked deserted. A freezing wind howled across the mountain ridge. Snow danced through the fading sunlight. The entire area felt abandoned, dead. Then Ryan noticed something strange. Roughly 100 yards away from the road stood an old military checkpoint. The structure looked ancient, half buried beneath snow. Its walls were cracked. Its roof partially collapsed. The building looked like it had been forgotten decades ago. Claire climbed off her motorcycle. I really need a restroom. Ryan pointed toward the abandoned checkpoint. Go behind that building. You sure? Nobody's here. Claire nodded and slowly walked toward the structure. Ryan remained beside the motorcycles, checking their luggage, looking at the map, trying to figure out where they would spend the night. The sun was now touching the horizon. Orange light stretched across the frozen mountains. Everything seemed peaceful, until the screaming started. A blood-curdling scream exploded through the silence. Ryan! The sound froze his blood. Ryan immediately looked toward the checkpoint. Claire was nowhere in sight. Another scream echoed across the pass. This one even worse, filled with terror. Pure terror. Claire! Ryan started running. His boots slammed into the snow as he rushed toward the building. The wind roared around him. His heart hammered against his chest. Claire! No answer, only screaming. Then suddenly the scream stopped. Completely. The silence that followed felt wrong. Terribly wrong. Ryan rounded the corner of the checkpoint, and what he saw nearly stopped his heart. Claire's body was lying in the snow nearly 50 feet away, as if someone had dragged her. A long trail marked the ground behind her. Ryan immediately ran toward her. Then something moved, 200 yards ahead, near a rocky slope. A figure, a massive figure. At first Ryan thought it was a bear. Then it stood upright. His entire body went cold. It wasn't a bear. It was a man, or at least something that looked like a man. The thing was incredibly tall, well over 6 feet. Its body was covered in thick tangled hair. A filthy blanket hung around its shoulders. Its arms looked unnaturally long. The creature turned slightly, and for one horrifying second Ryan saw its face. Its eyes, bright red, not glowing, but red, like blood. The creature stared directly at him, then sprinted toward the mountains. Its speed was impossible. Within seconds it disappeared among the rocks, gone, as if the mountain itself had swallowed it. Ryan stood frozen, unable to move, unable to think, unable to understand what he had just seen. Then he remembered Claire. He rushed toward her. She wasn't moving. Her eyes were closed. Snow covered her clothes. Claire, no response. His hands trembled as he checked her pulse. Still alive, thank God. Then he noticed her leg, and immediately wished he hadn't. The denim near her ankle had been shredded. Deep claw marks tore through the fabric, but that wasn't the worst part. Something had bitten her. A chunk of flesh was missing from above her ankle. Blood soaked the snow beneath her. Ryan felt his stomach turn. For several seconds he couldn't breathe. His mind refused to process what he was seeing. Human bite marks, not animal. Human. A sudden horn sounded from the road. Ryan looked up. A passing caravan had stopped. Several travelers were running toward him. One of them shouted, "What happened?" Ryan pointed toward Claire. "I don't know." Together they lifted her carefully. The travelers immediately realized she needed medical attention. One woman wrapped a jacket around Claire's leg to slow the bleeding. Another checked her breathing. The driver looked at Ryan. "The nearest shelter is Frostwind Station." Ryan immediately remembered the old man. The warning. The strange look in his eyes. The way he had begged them not to continue. For the first time that day, Ryan felt genuine fear. Not fear of the mountains. Not fear of altitude. Fear that the old man had known exactly what would happen. The van began descending the mountain. Ryan followed on his motorcycle. Darkness swallowed the road. Snowstorms gathered around the peaks. The entire journey back felt endless. Every shadow looked alive. Every rock looked like a crouching figure. And several times Ryan found himself checking his mirrors, because he couldn't shake the feeling that something was following them through the darkness. Watching. Waiting. By the time they reached Frostwind Station, night had completely fallen. The old man was still awake, standing outside beside a lantern, almost as if he had been expecting them. The moment he saw Claire being carried from the van, his face turned pale. He didn't look surprised, only disappointed, like a man watching a nightmare come true. Ryan rushed toward him. "You were right." The old man looked at Claire's injured leg, then quietly asked, "Did it happen near the checkpoint?" Ryan froze. "How did you know?" The old man's expression darkened, because deep down, he already knew exactly what had attacked her. And he knew the horrifying story behind it. A story the mountains had tried to bury beneath snow decades ago. A story Ryan was about to hear. And once he heard it, he would never look at those mountains the same way again. The dining hall of Frostwind Station was silent. Outside, the storm had grown stronger. Snow slammed against the windows. The wind howled through the mountains like something alive. Ryan sat beside Claire's bed. A local medic had cleaned her wound and wrapped fresh bandages around her leg. She was conscious now, but still shaken. The old man placed a cup of hot tea in front of Ryan and sat across from him. For several moments nobody spoke. Finally Ryan broke the silence. "You knew something was out there." The old man slowly nodded. "Yes." "What was it?" The old man stared into the fire. His face suddenly looked older, much older, as if he had carried the same secret for years. "What I'm about to tell you sounds impossible." Ryan leaned forward. "After what I saw today, I think I'm past impossible." The old man took a deep breath. Then he began. "Almost 20 years ago, the checkpoint you visited tonight was fully operational. It wasn't abandoned. Soldiers were stationed there every winter." Claire listened quietly. The old man continued. "The mountains become completely isolated during winter. Roads disappear. Entire valleys vanish beneath snow. Sometimes nobody can enter or leave for months." According to him, a small team of soldiers was assigned to remain at the checkpoint throughout one particularly brutal winter. They carried enough supplies to survive until spring. Food, fuel, medical equipment, everything they needed. At least that was the plan. Then the storms arrived. The worst storms anyone could remember. Snow buried entire sections of the mountain. Radio signals failed. Communication stopped. The soldiers became completely isolated. No rescue, no support, no contact with the outside world. Weeks passed, then months. Back at the military base, commanders assumed the men were still alive. After all, they had enough supplies, enough food, enough equipment. But when spring finally arrived and rescue teams managed to reach the checkpoint, something was terribly wrong. The old man paused. The fire crackled softly. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then he continued. The rescue team noticed movement outside the checkpoint. Ryan felt a chill run through his body. What kind of movement? A man? The old man's eyes narrowed. At least it looked like a man. The rescuers found a figure digging through frozen ground with bare hands. His hair reached almost to his waist. His beard covered most of his face. His clothes were torn into rags. The man looked more animal than human. One soldier called out to him. No response. Another stepped forward. Still no response. Then the figure slowly turned around and growled. Not shouted. Not screamed. Growled. Like a predator protecting its territory. The rescuers immediately realized something was wrong. Very wrong. The figure suddenly charged toward them, holding a large combat knife. One of the soldiers fired. The bullet struck him, but instead of falling, the figure kept running. Blood covered his chest, yet he continued moving. Then he disappeared into the mountains, exactly the same way the creature Ryan saw had disappeared. Silence filled the room. The old man looked directly at Ryan. The rescuers entered the checkpoint. His voice became quieter, and what they found inside became one of the darkest secrets these mountains have ever known. Ryan already knew he wasn't going to like the answer. The old man continued anyway. Inside the checkpoint were the remains of the soldiers, or what remained of them. The room looked like a slaughterhouse, walls covered in blood, bones scattered across the floor, human remains everywhere. Some bodies were missing limbs. Some were missing entire sections. Others couldn't even be identified. Claire covered her mouth. The old man continued, but that wasn't the strangest part. The emergency food supplies were untouched. Ryan frowned. What do you mean untouched? Exactly what I said. Cans of food, dried meals, emergency rations. Everything was still there. Nobody had touched any of it. The soldiers had enough food to survive. Yet somehow, one of them had turned on the others. The room fell silent again. Ryan stared at the old man. You think the thing I saw was one of those soldiers? The old man nodded slowly. That's what many people believe. Ryan shook his head. That's impossible. Maybe, but nobody ever found him. The creature was seen again, and again, and again. For years travelers reported strange encounters around Blackthorn Pass. Most sightings happened near sunset. Most happened near the abandoned checkpoint. People described the same thing. A tall figure, covered in hair, wrapped in old blankets, watching from a distance, sometimes standing motionless for hours, sometimes appearing on one mountain ridge and then somehow showing up somewhere else moments later. The stories never stopped. Neither did the disappearances. Claire swallowed hard. What happened to me? The old man looked at her bandaged leg. His expression darkened. I don't know. Maybe he attacked you. Maybe something else did. But every person who has seen him closely describes the same eyes. Ryan already knew the answer. Red. The old man nodded. Red. A loud bang suddenly echoed against the wall. Everyone jumped. The storm outside had intensified. For a brief moment Ryan thought he saw something move beyond the window. A shadow. Standing outside. Watching. He immediately stood. The shadow vanished. Gone. The old man noticed his reaction, then quietly said something that Ryan would never forget. Sometimes the mountains don't let things die. Nobody slept much that night. Every sound felt threatening. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. Several times Ryan woke up convinced somebody was walking outside the building. Slow footsteps, crunching through snow, circling the station, watching, waiting. But whenever he looked outside, nothing was there. Only darkness, only snow, only silence. The next morning the storm finally ended. The sky was clear. The mountains looked peaceful again, almost beautiful, as if nothing terrible had ever happened there. Claire's condition had improved enough to travel. Before leaving, Ryan approached the old man. For several seconds neither spoke. Then Ryan lowered his head. You tried to warn us. The old man nodded. I did. I'm sorry I didn't listen. The old man placed a hand on his shoulder. Most travelers don't. Ryan looked toward the distant mountains, toward Blackthorn Pass, toward the abandoned checkpoint hidden somewhere beneath the snow. Do you think it's still alive? The old man followed his gaze. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he quietly replied, I think some questions are safer, and answered. Ryan and Claire left Frostwind Station shortly afterward. Neither of them ever returned to those mountains. Years have passed since that night. Claire still carries the scar on her leg, a permanent reminder of what happened. But according to locals, the figure is still there, wandering the mountains after sunset, watching the road, waiting for travelers who ignore warnings. And every winter, when storms cover Blackthorn Pass in snow, some drivers claim they see a tall man standing beside the abandoned checkpoint, motionless, silent, his body wrapped in torn blankets, his eyes fixed on the road, waiting. as if his hunger never ended, as if something inside those mountains refused to let him die. And if you ever find yourself alone in a frozen mountain pass after dark, and hear a voice calling your name from somewhere beyond the snow, keep driving. Do not stop. Do not look back, because the thing calling you may have been waiting for decades, and it may finally be hungry again. So this was the story. Follow Nightmare Files for more terrifying horror stories.